Okay, we're live. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to Danielle today. She is joining, so if you haven't, or if you don't know who she is, Danielle is the founder, host, and everything amazing of the Merriweather Council podcast. And here she is, and then she'll introduce herself.
I don't know if I've ever done this before.
Hey, how's it going? We've already got a bunch of people joining, so
Oh, I'm so
yeah,
excited. I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
totally. I'm so excited you were able to join. Can everyone hear okay? Is this weird? Are you getting feedback at all?
I'm not, no.
I'm
It was
getting,
for a second, but then I just had to turn my volume down.
okay, I'm getting a tiny bit, so hopefully it's not gonna affect anything. I'll turn my volume down too. But cool.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, maybe for those of you, or for those who don't know you, which I don't think there's very many, but why don't you introduce yourself and then tell them a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, well, okay, sorry. I'm just trying to find the perfect place for this phone to be.
It's okay.
Um, I'm Danielle, and I am the Chief Bossy Pants at the Merriweather Council, where we teach makers in business how to turn their crafty tendencies into profits. And also, I am a handmade business owner myself. I've been selling my custom hand embroidery online for the past 10 years. So I kind of have these like two sides of my business right now where we're doing like education as well as making and selling.
Yeah, that's a lot. And that's probably one of the meaty questions that we'll get to later. Um, so I guess we can jump right into the questions, but how did your embroidery side come about? Because that's where you started, right?
Right. So I went to art school. I graduated high school and I went to the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. And while I was there, I majored in fibers. It's actually a 3D fine arts major with a concentration in fibers. And of course, fibers is all the things that we both love:
Yeah.
yarn, thread, weaving, knitting, embroidery. The school I went to had a focus on more conceptual fine art, like more sculptural art, as opposed to textile design, which a lot of fibers programs are textile based, surface design and stuff like that. We did some of that, but it was mostly like installation or sculpture. And I really like to build things and make things, but I really don't actually have a huge strong in like conceptual fine art. So when I graduated, or I was about to graduate, I was like really torn. Like, what do I want to do with my life? I'm sure everybody in every program ever who's in college feels that way. But I was just like, I don't know if I want to be a fine artist, but I do like to make things. So in my senior year, I did my like thesis project, which at art school is not much of a thesis. It was like a 6-page paper and a presentation about the handmade movement. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, why do I just, go and do this? But it didn't seem very secure. And all my teachers were like, don't do that. Be a gallery artist. Like, it'll be so much better, blah, blah, blah. That's what they were used to because this handmade movement thing is kind of new, in the capacity that we know it anyway. And so I decided, I was like, well, I can tolerate college. I'll just go to grad school. So I applied to graduate school and I was like, I'll just put off, deciding what I want to be when I grow up for another 2 years. And I was going to do that. And then at the very last minute, I decided not to go. And I just started my handmade business instead.
Wow.
So, I mean, there was a lot of reasons why I decided not to go that were kind of like out of my control. But I was like, you know what? It's fine. I didn't really want to do that anyway. I was doing that because I didn't feel like I had any other options. So once that option didn't exist anymore, essentially, I was like, well, I have nothing to lose, so I'll just do what I actually want to do. So that's how it started. And I started making sewn projects actually first. And then I got really into embroidery, and that just kind of took on its own personality.
Yeah, I mean, you were in the Etsy game for a while too, like right at the beginning almost, right? When you first started selling on Etsy.
Yeah, so I think I got on Etsy. It was like 2010. I know that. I don't know. I think Etsy started like 2005,
Mm.
2006, something in there. So, I was like on the newer side, like when it was still newer, but definitely not like an OG or anything.
But close
Um,
enough.
but yeah, it's been quite a while, so learned a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you teach your Etsy course and everything.
Yes,
Um,
we do.
so from there though, so from selling embroidery on Etsy, how did you then morph into having your counsel and that side of your business?
Yeah, so I was selling on Etsy, like I said, started in 2010, like right after I graduated college. And I had the same struggles everybody else does. Like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing at all. Everything is hard. Why is it so hard? um, and eventually I found some traction and like sort of found my groove, and things started to really like take off a little bit and like snowball. And then at the time, I don't know how many people here remember this, but at that time it was a lot of emphasis on Etsy teams, where they were, I mean, teams still exist, but now they're mostly like in-person things. And then it was sort of in person, but also very much online with the treasuries and stuff like that. So through teams and stuff, people were asking me very regularly, like pretty often, like, how are you doing what you're doing? And like, you're getting all these features. And like, I see you on the front page, like back in the day when the front page was like a big deal. Um, and I really like talking to people about business stuff and shop stuff. So I was happy to chat with people. And then I started like blogging about it, and that again just took on its own personality and became its own thing. So over time, it just kind of became, I was like, I'm telling people the same stories over and over. I'm giving people the same advice over and over. We could like put this into like some sort of a thing that like people could consume on their own time. Or like we could reach more people. And for me, that was important because when I was deciding if I wanted to do this, I felt like I didn't have that option really, because no one around me knew how to support my idea. My teachers had no clue what I was doing. My parents were like, what are you talking about? So, it was important for me to be like that person that I didn't have. I really enjoyed being able to show people like, no, this is possible. You can do it. And here's some help to get you there.
Totally. So then from the blog, is that how the podcast came about? Because you've had the podcast for a while too.
Yeah. So, the blog, I mean, my blog has like outlived my business, like predated my business even. I had it in like, I don't know, the very end of high school even. It's just like evolved over time. Or maybe it was like college, I don't know. But so yeah, I was doing the blog, and then I think it was like 2016. My friend Jen was like, you really need a podcast. This is how people like to consume their information now. And she encouraged me to start the podcast, and it's really just an audio blog basically. So it is an extension of the blog. It's a lot of similar ideas and all that kind of thing. I've enjoyed doing the podcast. It's a lot more work than blogging, I think. I mean, I've never been like a like super blogger, but the podcast it's more interactive. I think people do like to get their information this way.
I mean, that's
So
totally
it's
how I
fun.
found you. I
Oh,
think I
well, I'm so
found you.
glad.
Do you remember? This was probably a couple years ago now, but there was this online maker summit run by Tizitco, Deb from Tizitco, and you were one of the people on the summit,
Yeah.
and that's how I found you. So
Oh
I
my
probably
gosh.
listened to every episode since then, but
Wow.
so I'm a
I'm
fangirl
always
over
like
here.
blown away. I'm always blown away. Like even now, people will be like, I'm starting at the beginning again. And I'm like, it's like Netflix or something. Like
It's
that's what I do
awesome
with
though.
Dawson's Creek.
Well, and I think, I mean, like any anything in life, every season, even of your business, you know, something new comes up, or maybe you're navigating a new aspect, or you've learned something. So going back, I feel like in the podcast, even you're like, oh, there's
Oh
nuggets
yeah.
in here that I didn't really think about before, but now you're like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
re-listen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm positive that there are some like really good gems back in the like early episodes. There's definitely things that like have changed or that I might be like, well, here's a more elevated take on that same thing now, but I haven't ever like gone back and like taken any episodes down, I don't think. There are a couple things that maybe are like outdated or whatever, but I'm like, if you're listening to something from 2016, you have to sort of like take it with a grain of salt. If it's about something like a platform or whatever, like just maybe double check it. But there's definitely some good stuff back there. And I do like the fact that, you just keep building on it. It's similar to a blog too. Just, yeah, it's more interactive. I think people like it. So
Yeah, I
that's
definitely
fun.
do. But okay, so kind of along those lines, I'm pivoting a tiny bit, but one of the big questions I always get asked too is how do you talk to your different audiences? Because you definitely have very different audiences. So on your Instagram, for example, it seems like it's mostly geared towards other makers and about, you know, the podcast and that side of your business. So then do you have something like that for your embroidery side, or how do you kind of navigate that aspect?
So this is what I love about being self-employed, solopreneurship, entrepreneurship, and like especially in this like modern world where we have all these like tools at our just like at our disposal daily, Instagram, email, all this stuff. You can kind of like throttle back and forth, as needed, or like decide, do you want to segment your audience in X, Y, and Z way? For me, I tried for a really long time to bring them together, and I just found like it does not work because for me it doesn't work. I'm sure there are people out there who have figured it out, but for me it just was too much, not enough overlap, basically. And I spent, like I said, I've been selling the products for 10 years. So I feel like for 10 years, it's been building up its own sort of like legacy outside of me. It doesn't need me to talk about it every single day. I think that the maker to maker part of my business, the educational side, needs me to talk to it every day. People need to hear from me and see like, look, I'm present, I'm up to date, I know what I'm doing. The people who buy my embroidery just need to see that it's what they want and see all the work I've done already, like on the page that they're looking at, to feel the impulse, right, to buy it. But that's like at the level that I'm working it right now. In the past, it's been full-time income, just the embroidery, or part-time income at times, or at other points in time, no income when I was just like not focusing on it at all. So like right now, it's like a sliding scale. Like some years it's a lot, some years it's less, but like it's always doing more for me than I'm putting in. Like I'm putting in a little and I'm getting out a little bit more than that, or I'm putting in a lot and I'm getting out a lot. So for me, I feel like that side of my business just kind of does what it does. And if I want to step in and do more and push it harder, I can. But this side of my business, I think, needs more of the face to face, like daily interaction. So that's where I've like focused the energy. But people can decide, if they have two different audiences, can you blend them? I think it's worth trying to blend them. But for me, I just like never found the right balance. So I'm like probably not a good resource on that, but I think it is worth trying to bring together because it is really hard to have multiple channels for this, like two Instagram accounts or two email lists or whatever. So I think people just have to, kind of try and see what works and then be okay with it if it doesn't work and making decisions based on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's super good insight because I think, you know, even just in different niches of creative business, it can
Mm-hmm.
be different too. So, I mean, I guess for knitting, for example, well, even just talking just knitting and just Instagram, you're like
Mm-hmm.
clearly most of my followers I know are other makers, but then you're like, but who's buying my hats? But then I was talking about this with another friend where you're like, yeah, but maybe the people who are just here to buy the hats are the ones that are just less engaged. The makers are the ones that are the most engaged. So I don't know. I guess I'm still in the navigation part, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's true too. Like it totally depends on your unique audience, and like that audience also changes over time too, right? Depending on what you put out, like who is coming to you and like who's being attracted through that content that you're putting out. So it's just like, but like I said, that's what's so great about being able to decide and having the tools and just like pulling this lever or this lever, and how much do you pull each lever each week or each year or whatever. So
Yeah. And well, and I think that's what you talk about a lot, especially in regards to the Etsy courses. Like, I guess I haven't taken it, but but what you talk about it is having it work harder for you, just like what you're saying before, so you can let it do its thing. So I guess for you right now, at the stage you are with the embroidery side, are you mostly selling via your own site and then Etsy, and then like how do you talk to those people, or is it just they are bringing you their own traffic?
so at this particular instance in time, we're actually like on the verge of moving. So I've actually taken on my site, I've just like marked everything as sold out, because I'm like, I don't want to, even that is like inventory in two places, like unless you're like very on top of, I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter because everything's made to order. But I was like, just for the time being, I marked everything sold out on my website. So right now I'm only selling on Etsy, and I'm happy with the amount of orders and whatever that I get on Etsy, because I literally don't do anything there for like months at a time. I'm not in there every day. I'm not like tweaking things. I've set it up and it works for me. Like you said, that's what I always say is like, let it do the work for me. I feel like that is the real benefit of Etsy. Whereas something like having your own website, you do have to kind of like nurture that and push people there and whatever. And we even tell people this, like, don't send your hard-earned traffic to Etsy. It's so likely, because of the way Etsy is, that people just like one or two clicks and they're like in someone else's shop and they might not even realize it. So when you're working really hard for that traffic, you're possessive of it. Like, don't leave me, like come and be with me only. Like, I worked so hard to get you to click my link. Now stay with me. And that's what happens when you send people to your own site. But like to send them to Etsy is like you're just driving traffic to Etsy. And there's no like reasonable expectation it 100% stays with you. So that's why I love Etsy so much, is because I can do my life out here on the side, and Etsy does its thing, and it just works. Like if you set it up right, that's how it should be. Like Etsy should be generating more of your traffic than you're generating. Like we call it, like in the Etsy course, we call it the Danielle standard. If you're on your Etsy stats, it tells you like, here's the amount of traffic Etsy drove and here's the amount of traffic you drove. And we always like to see Etsy like at least 50%, but usually like 70 or 80%. And as long as that's happening, I'm happy.
Totally. Well, and I think I learned it from you too, where when I started using Pinterest, for example, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
all the links are going to go to my site,
Absolutely.
and we'll see
Yeah.
what happens with the Etsy. I'm still new to that whole thing, but yeah, learned it from you.
Yeah. And especially if you're going to pay to like promote a pin or something, you don't want to pay to promote Etsy. You want to pay to promote you.
Totally. Well, okay, so let's roll back a little bit and talk more about, I guess, just in general for your business, either side. What was who inspires you, and how were you inspired to create both of them? You can choose
Well,
which one you want to talk to.
sorry.
You can choose which side you want to talk about.
Sure, sure. Well, for me, like I said earlier, when it comes to the education side of the business, I feel like what really inspires me is the fact that I have seen and felt for myself how awesome it is to be your own boss, to be self-employed, to create something from scratch and like see it work and see it generate results. And like there's so much pride involved, right, in having your own business your work in general and selling it to people and seeing how other people interact with your work, which is something that I guess I picked up in art school too, because that is such like the ultimate, like, this is my work. um, so for me, with the education side of things, it really is about like just helping people to, like I said, turn crafty tendencies into profits. Because we've seen it, you know, firsthand and secondhand through so many of our students, like the joy and the pride that people feel being able to do that, and the freedom that it provides people to, you know, be present for their families or their children or whatever is important to them in their life. And then in terms of like the embroidery business, for me, I have always loved doing the letter forms. I just really like, I don't care so much about, this is where I'm the anti-art school kid. I don't care about the end result. I just like the process. So I'm fine to stitch the same project 900 times because I don't care about creating new things. I care about like the process of making things. So for me, it's just a process thing. But some people really need that like constant change, or like new things, new projects, which is like totally an art school thing. And but I'm like, I don't care what I make as long as I'm making something. Like, you know, there's definitely been times where I'm like, I cannot stitch one more stupid letter. But you know, I realized I'm like, I actually don't care about the end result. I just like the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this I'm curious too because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about it, but what drew you to go to art school? I mean, you've always been an artsy person or were, did you have little craft business hobbies before or what kind of led you
Yeah.
to that?
It's so funny because my husband always is like, you're so obsessed with like monetizing things. Because he's an artist too, and I'm always like, we could sell these, you know. And he's like, I don't want to sell them, and I'm like, but we should. But I'm like, this is just who I am. Like when I was like 6, I was making like beaded bracelets and like selling them to my grandma. You know, like I'm just like, if we're making it, we're selling it. Like they're not separated. In my
Yeah.
head, this is one action. We make, we sell. It's just one thing. So that's just me, like my little entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that even answers your question, but that's just how I've always been. And then I guess because you can sell anything, the reason I went to art school though is because I really like I guess I knew, or like my body knew that I just liked making things, and I didn't know like how else do you build things in college. You know, I didn't like see any like options beyond that, I guess. But it's the only thing I ever really liked. I hated sports. It's the only thing I ever stuck with. I hated piano, music, clarinet. I tried all these things, soccer, softball, hated everything. I hated everything, dance, ballet, tap. I did everything and I hated everything except art. It's the only thing I ever liked.
Hey, that's
So,
awesome.
and it turns out I don't actually even like a lot of the traditional art forms. I'm really more of a like, let's cut stuff up and put it back together or sew things. I was always like, my mom is like really into this like Danielle folklore of like, I used to take clothes out of my closet and like cut them up to make clothes for my dolls.
That's amazing.
Like, you can't do this.
Well, and I love that you are always an entrepreneur too. I mean, it obviously speaks to what your business has become and how you've gotten here too.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is super cool. I know. I think that's really unique to me because for me I'm like a science background and I work with
Mm-hmm.
I'm a chef and I just kind of had a like creative hobby as something to wind down with, never thinking at all it would be a
Oh, yeah.
business. I never thought I'd even have a business, and here
Yeah.
we are. So I don't know, it's kind of crazy.
That's how so many people like end up in this though. Most people, like I call them like Shark Tank businesses. Like most of us are not like Shark Tank business people where we're like saw a problem and solved it and now we have a business. We're just like stumbled into like making stuff, and then the people around us were like, hey, you should sell that, or you know, we were like, hey, we could sell this. We're not like necessarily just like, I mean, I think I kind of am just generally an entrepreneur, but I find so many people just like sort of stumble into it and they enjoy it. They just had no idea, like you said, like never would have pictured it for themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so I'm curious. Sorry, my dog's in here. Get
Oh,
out of
you're
here
fine.
before you. She's gonna. I was like knock over. Um, so kind of branding has been a really big topic with a lot of these lives because I think it's such a hard thing to navigate. And especially for you having essentially two businesses, how would you describe, well, I guess first off, how would you describe your brand aesthetic and how you developed your brand?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, I think there's like two levels to branding, which is like your like basic, like this is the look and feel, fonts, colors, whatever. But then there's like your like who you are, who your what your brand is, what it stands for, what it does, its purpose, all this stuff. Um, for me, when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. Like I said, just like everybody else, have absolutely no clue. Just fumbling around. I just started with something that I felt like was represented me as the person I show up as in my business, making things. Which is actually like I felt like completely different than my like personal aesthetic. Like my business is so like bright and colorful, and I'm just like black and white all the time. Like don't really like all of these like bright colors or whatever. But that's like what I liked to make. So I was like, let me build a brand around, who I am as this person I show up in as in my business when I'm creating things. And, over time it just like evolved. But then when I was getting really serious with like the education stuff, I actually did one of those like real in-depth like rebrands with like a branding person. And it's such an interesting process to go through with that designer. And I'm sure they all do something similar, but you go through and like you answer all these questions and they're like sort of meant to like dig out all these like little nuances about your audience. And then you build the brand based on what connects you to the audience. And it was a really interesting process. I would never have thought half of that stuff on my own. But in terms of like, do you want me to say like what my brand is?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think people always, it's so hard to figure out sometimes who you are. And some people too, you're like, am I my brand? Am I
Yeah,
not? How much of me is, you know?
right. Well, I think for everybody who's probably watching this or will hear this, it is you. Because most of us are like solopreneurs. We don't have like 50 employees or whatever. So I feel like even if you wanted to create this like there's just no way to be like hands off your handmade brand. So, um, the things that you are and what you believe and what you value do like manifest into your outward facing business and brand. So, I mean, I think that's great, in the grand scheme of things. I think it's kind of nice. It gives your brand a personal face or a personal facet. You don't have to be the face of your business, but you are definitely the hands. So it is hard to separate. But for me, I like being the sort of like voice and face of the education side of the business and showing up in a way that we can kind of connect on these ideas. Like we don't have to agree on everything. We just have to get along. If you feel like my vibe matches your learning style, then like we're good. And obviously everybody wants their brand to look professional, sound professional. And that's just like technical stuff. That's not even anything to do with you. You can take your personality and put it in a professional framework, I think, no matter who you are. But it's just a lot of like growing and developing and like settling into like trying things and then seeing what works. So I don't know. That's a big question.
It's huge. Well, I mean, we could probably do an entire live just on that, but
Oh,
for
absolutely.
you, like what I was drawn to, I guess, was like I love the pop culture references because
Mm.
it's kind of like it's so when you, okay, I will say I do love Taylor Swift too. Um, but when you make those connections, especially, you're just like, oh my gosh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. And
Hmm.
now that you're seeing it happening in like real life, not that ours isn't real life, but you know what I'm saying? It's just so helpful to figure it out. So how did you, come up with that aspect to your branding?
So I tend to be like sort of at least I think this is the answer, or this might maybe is going to give you some insight. I tend to be more of like a private person. I'll talk about business all day. I'll talk about pop culture all day. Like there's certain things I'll talk about all day long. I don't care. But then there's certain things where I'm like, I don't want to talk about like my husband or like my house or whatever. Like those things I just like those are like my personal life things. And then but there are things like the pop culture that I feel like is the connection point between me as a person and me being like a brand. And like that's something I can talk about that is genuinely my personality to be like completely obsessed with the Backstreet Boys. But I can make a connection to it business wise, or I can connect to people on that personal level if they too are really into pop culture and like 90s stuff and whatever. So for me, that is like, it started as just me being like, I really like the Backstreet Boys. It has nothing to do with anything. I'm just saying it. But then over time, I was like, we can actually like drive this as like part of like something that people expect from us, and connect with people that way on that one thing. Or like there are certain things that's just one thing that is like personal, but that we can connect to the business. You know what I mean? Without being like, here, I expose my soul to you every day.
Right. Well,
So
and if it's your thing, then some people do or do not. But
exactly.
in that sense, then how do you feel like you built your audience and fan base by using those aspects of your brand?
Yeah, so I think it's really important for all business owners to be okay with repelling people, because in the process of repelling people, you are making more room, and stronger connections to the right people. And it's actually great if you repel people, if they just like don't like your style, or like if people are like, I don't want to hear about the Backstreet Boys, they go and follow someone else. So it's fine with me, if me talking about certain things draws people in, but it's even more fine with me if it repels people, because I don't need everybody to be like super gung ho about the Backstreet Boys the same way I am, but you have to have some sort of like, you have to be able to tolerate it, right, to stick around. So it's like definitely like it's kind of like a gatekeeper. Like a lot of people follow Gary Vee. Some people love him, some people hate him, and one of the like most polarizing things about him is that he curses a lot. So people who like can't tolerate that just tune him out. And that's so much better for him, right? That he doesn't have to deal with people who don't want to deal with him the way that he genuinely is. So I think it's really for anybody building a brand, you have to be okay with like repelling people just as much as you want to bring people closer to you. Because you can't be everything to everybody. And no one learns from just one teacher. Like in my case, I always like tell myself that I'm like, not everybody is going to learn everything they need to know from me. So I'm here for this one thing, and we're doing it in this one way, in this sort of package. And if you like that package, cool. And if you don't, that's fine too. I don't think that there's people in my audience who would necessarily identify themselves as Backstreet Boy fans and handmade business owners in large quantity, but there's people who are like, it kind of it helps keep people like in the right age range for me, because people who like have any reference point to the Backstreet Boys are going to be in that right age range for our brand and our business. And I think it's just a way of, identify like in your business, if you can identify a few things that just help keep people in or out, it really helps cultivate the right audience.
Totally. I love everything you said about that because I remember the first time I heard someone talk about branding and repelling, I was like, what does that even mean? Like, why would you do that? But it makes so
Right.
much sense that you're like, yeah, because then the people who do stick around, if you're strong enough in that who you are, and in a way that, hey, if you don't like it, it's okay, um, then you are truly speaking to the people who really get it and feel you. But I mean,
Yeah.
I'll say I like the Backstreet Boys. I'm not like their number one fan or anything, but probably one of the best karaoke numbers I ever do is I Want It That
Yeah.
Way. So
Yeah, and it's like I said too, like it kind of helps keep the right, sort of parameters for who we serve the best. Like anybody can learn from us, I'm sure, but like to the extent we want to be connected to people, like it just helps to have certain things that people are like it's fine if people are like, that's not for me. It helps them find who's going to work for them.
for sure. Yeah. Cool. So let's see here. I have many more. Well, we kind of talked about the target market thing, um, and your creative inspiration. So, how, well, especially at your stage in the business, how do you define success?
Okay, so I've actually been like thinking about this. I think about this a lot, but this year, obviously, like with not being able to like go anywhere, do anything, I'm like, what truly like makes me happy, right? Because to just like be with myself all the time. Um, so normally, I think first of all, I think success is an evolving, it's not an end point. It's just like, do you feel success? And that can change, right? Like from year to year, month to month, whatever. But for me, I think I feel most successful when I'm not like stressing out about the work I'm doing. I just feel like, yes, of course, this is the work I'm doing. And just feel like a lot of like conviction about the work I'm doing and seeing that it helps people. And also, having the freedom in most times to be flexible with my schedule, to do the things I want to do or go the places I want to go. Like my husband and I live in Virginia. My parents live in New York. Most of my family and friends live in New York. I like to be able to like go to New York, like whenever, and bring my work with me. To me, that's a huge factor. I don't like being like tied down, which is like obviously right now, like no choice. But, um, having that freedom of flexibility and knowing that the work reaches people and helps them and not feeling like forced, like the work I do doesn't feel forced. It just feels like, well, of course that's what I'm going to do. It just feels so natural to do it. I feel like those three things are like, for me right now, that's when I'm like, yes, we're being successful.
Totally, when there's no stress or you've created the systems and workflow to where you're truly just enjoying what you're doing, because that's why you want to be your own boss, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't even mean like no stress, everything works all the time, because that's
Right.
definitely not the way
No,
it is.
yeah.
But like, I'm not stressed about like, oh, we have to talk about, oh, Etsy did something, we have to talk about it. This is such a drain. Like, it's just like, Etsy did something, that's cool, let's talk about it. It's not like stressful. It's like, that's cool. Like, I feel like energized by it instead of like, ugh.
Right. Well, so then along those lines, I know we kind of talked about the two biz thing again, but for you, when you feel the most in flow with balancing the two sides of your business,
Mhm.
how would you describe that?
So I think for a long time, and like we spoke about earlier, like trying to blend these two together, like bring both audiences to one Instagram account, like it was so hard. And when I finally just was like, you know what, it's not working. I just felt like so much better to just be like, it's fine, it doesn't work. Like just let it be what it is, and just pick. Like I feel like business is all just like decision making. You just have to decide. Like there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to decide and be committed to that decision. Like, okay, we're not going to have an Instagram presence for the embroidery business. Would it be cool if we did? Probably, but we don't, and that's fine too, because it makes it so that the other things can be as successful and, not stressful and whatever as we want them to be. And we have room to be energized about those things that we feel energized about. There was just like a lot of like battle between content, like, oh, we already posted this and now I got to post this other thing.
Right.
So to just make a decision and feel good about it and just let yourself, like, trust yourself to make those decisions, I think is so important.
Totally. Well, it's like letting the sides of the business almost dictate what you do for them. Like, this works for this side, this doesn't for this side. So I'm going to focus, instead of trying to parallel everything from both, you're choosing the ones that make the most sense for that side of the business and doing it the best in that way.
Exactly. And for me, like, this is obviously different for everybody, but for me, I don't necessarily feel like I have to see so much like monetary success in my embroidery business right now, because I feel more accomplished when I'm a small part of a lot of people's success story as opposed to just my own. Like, I know how to do this already, and like I've seen it happen already for myself, but now I want to help other people see it happen for themselves. It's like a whole different, side of the coin. So, that's what I meant earlier too, is like, you can decide from year to year, like, where you want to put your focus, or like what's important to you, or what's going to work for your lifestyle or whatever. And for me, it just feels so much more satisfying. And like, I do, I guess, feel more successful when I'm part of a bunch of different success stories, not just my own. Like, it doesn't have to all be about me. I've seen what I can do. That was fun. Now let me see what I can do over here, and we can have fun with this too. I also do sometimes feel very isolated from humans when I'm only working in my little section of the handmade world. I like talking to people, and I like, I'm kind of like nosy, I guess. I like to see what everybody else is doing with their business. And like, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm kind of like a Budinsky, and I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be great if you did X, Y, and Z? So I don't know. It's like, it just scratches like a different itch, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, do you ever feel like you'll move away from the actual embroidery side then, or kind of?
I don't think so. I really do enjoy, like I said, that process of making things. And I just like, I would just make things, and then like, what would they do? I would just have them.
True.
I can't do like I said earlier, it's like one big action to me is like, we make things, we sell them. It's one thing. It's not, I make things, I enjoy them. Like, I don't know how to just like make things just for fun. I need somebody to tell me, make this, because I don't think that I'm always turned on creatively like that. Like, my creative, like, thinking, from scratch brain is not always on, but I always like the process of making something, which is why I don't care about the end result. I just like to make something, but I can't always come up with just like from out of nowhere something to make. So I like that. Like, you tell me what to make, and then I make it for you.
Right. I guess it's like the levers you're talking about. Like, when you're feeling in that flow, you'll pursue that more or whatever,
Yeah.
but it's always part of it is a part of who you are in your business. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, who knows? It could change. Next year, maybe I'll be like, I'm a new person. I'm just a straight up artist now. That's all I do is make my art.
Yeah.
No, like, there's so much room to grow. And that's, again, why I like the idea of small business so much, is because you can be flexible. You're not beholden to anybody's rules except your own. So there's so much potential.
Always. Yeah. Okay. So currently, I guess more meaty too, but what do you feel like you struggle the most with as a business owner?
What do I struggle the most? What do I not struggle with? That's a better question. I struggle a lot with like having a lot of ideas for things we could do and deciding which ones to actually do. And I spend a lot of time thinking like, oh, we could do this, this, and this, and that would be great for these people and those people. But then I'm like, how far away from our like mission am I stepping? Like I have to come back to like, what is our mission and like, how do we serve them, you know, those people in the way that we want to? Um, and even just like little things, like I spend a lot of time thinking about, you know, like the stuff that we put into emails and content. And I need to get better. I try to be better about the process for creating that content. I really actually enjoy writing, but I find that I get very overwhelmed by it. So for me, that's, you know, one of the things I struggle with is like the process, because where I am I'm very good with like my embroidery process. I'm very bad with my process for all of the like back end technical implementation type things. That's like really not my favorite, but it's just a big part of the kind of work that we do now. So that's something I struggle with, is just like process for getting things done, content wise.
Yeah,
And deciding what
all
those
do.
things should be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Definitely. Creating those systems, I'm a baby in that sense.
Yeah. And I think that it's, for me, it's been a tremendous help to have a team member. Like I do have like 3 team members right now. And it's so much better when everybody just like is in there. Like I do what I do and they do what they do. And they're so much better at those things than I am. So, and I really enjoy, you know, hiring someone to do something and then letting them do it instead. Like as an artist, I don't like to tell other people how to do their art, right? Like, even if we wouldn't consider it art, like, my Kristen, she does my like email automations and I'm like, this is what we need. You figure it out however works for you.
So you
I'm
still
not going to
write
tell
it?
you how to do your art.
Right. So you still write it, but she helps like with the, I don't know,
Yeah.
the
It's
systemy
all
part.
of the like system things that I'm like, if it was up to me, there would be, well, just do whatever we want today.
Nice.
It's like me just constantly like throwing out the confetti, and the 3 of them are like, okay, I got it. I got it.
It's like Marie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, and I don't want to have questions not be answered. I
okay.
think I saw one up above. Um, and so here's the question from Soft Stoneworks.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you guys give to a recent college grad that is starting an Etsy shop? And yes, we stand for the Backstreet Boys.
Yes. Oh my goodness. What advice would I give a recent college grad who's starting an Etsy shop? I think for anybody who's starting an Etsy shop, the biggest thing is you cannot just like expect instant results. You have to keep working on it until it's at a point where, you know, it can sort of like hold itself up. But people like they get into it and I guess the expectation or whatever is wrong, or, you know, people don't realize how many things you can do or whatever. And they just give up too soon. You have to put in the work, but the work you're putting in has to be the right work. Otherwise, it is a waste of time. You have to do the right work, and it's very easy to get sidetracked into like all this other work. But for me, I would say you have to give it your best shot by doing the right work from the beginning, and like knowing what's important and what's not, because there's a lot of stuff that like you could do that's just like it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think I might have heard you say this before, where it's like, but also give that work time to see what happens instead of like changing something one day, changing something the next day, when it's not like that
Yeah.
one day would have helped it
Right.
make a difference. right?
Yeah, you have to give the work that you've done a chance to actually work.
Mm-hmm.
Like even now, like I mean, everybody knows the struggles with like the algorithms and like when you post something to Instagram, like not every single person who follows you is going to see it. So you have to like give it a chance to get out there, and you have to keep putting the same thing out there. You have to repeat yourself like a million times. You're going to get so sick and tired of hearing yourself talk, but like you have to, because people only heard it like 10% of the times you said it. Um, so it's really important to just realize like, yes, you're doing a lot of work, but like a lot of work to get enough people to see or hear it or whatever, especially like on something like Instagram, where, as we all know, all the problems with the, and whatever, like you just have to be okay with keep on doing things and give it a chance to work for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even like you said, even if it's only 10% that saw it, and even if someone actually did see it, they might not remember, or it might not register with them, or it might just be like, oh, I'm not interested right now. But then if you keep showing up, maybe that one time they're like, oh my God, yes, this is the moment, and it
The,
makes sense.
exactly. And the thing that I've learned is that we have to prioritize data. Um, like for me, sometimes I even like, even now, I feel so discouraged sometimes, right? When I'm like, oh, like no one is reacting to this, or like no one's taking the action we want. And then we have to go and look at the data. It's like, well, only 10 people saw it. So like what, you can't expect anything from 10 people. Like you have to look at like the rate of, who actually saw it, how many of them actually clicked it, from those who clicked it, how many of them actually like showed any interest, like you have to look at the actual data to feel better about it, because you think you're telling 17,000 people about it, but only like 200 of them even had the opportunity to see it.
Right. Well, it's like,
You
and
know
who
what
were
I
you
mean?
talking to? What was the goal of that thing you were telling them? Was it to go
Right.
here or do this or whatever?
Exactly.
Nikki Chicky said, you feel like you're spamming everyone, but you're
Mhm.
not. You're like
No,
maybe 5% of the people, but probably not
no one
even
saw it.
5%. Yeah, it's like probably not even. And the people who probably see it the most are the ones that really like you anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
generally.
There was one of our council members was feeling like so discouraged the other day, and she was like, I sent an email and I only made 4 sales. And I'm like, well, how big is your list? She was like, there's only like 20 people on it. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
you made 4 sales from 20
Yeah,
people? Don't even talk to me. Like,
that's
that's
amazing.
insane. That's amazing.
That's really good.
I'm like, but see, when we look at the data, that's incredible. Only 4 sales can definitely sound like no big deal, right? Like if you're expecting something huge, right? But I'm like, but out of 20 people, like that's insane. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great, especially right now. Is she selling
Right.
masks? Because
No, not masks.
oh my gosh.
Like, this is why the data is important, you guys.
True. I mean, it's like, I know for your product, do you tend to have a season that's busier, or is it more just, I don't know, not random, but you know what I'm saying?
Sometimes wedding season, which is like not existent this year, and usually Christmas for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I also show up more at Christmas, because if I do my job all year, my students don't need me at Christmas time. That
Right.
gives me time to pay attention to my other stuff.
Right. So I guess that's when you're opening, you're doing the podcast and like the
Yeah,
makery
it
biz
just
side now, not during
right.
the holidays.
Yeah, it just gives me a little bit more time to like throw myself into the embroidery side of it at Christmas. So that's probably part of it. But then obviously just the fact that it's Christmas also. So
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, I know for knitting, obviously right now it's not really hat sewing season because
right.
really hot. No one really cares. um, but yeah, it's like you still got to show up in some way and be the top of mind and make people see it to
Mm-hmm.
remember later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I'm trying to see. Anyone else have questions? You should type them in now. We only have a hot 5 left. But well, gosh, we didn't even get through a lot of these, but
I'm sorry. I'm so talkative.
no,
So
not, don't be sorry. I'm like, I love getting deep into the questions more. It's like extras just in case, you know?
yeah.
Um, but I guess if anyone has a question while they're kind of thinking them up or typing, you did kind of give a lot of advice already, but what would be one big thing one big piece of advice that you would give anyone kind of just beginning on their maker journey?
Just beginning on your maker journey. I think that, like, if it was me back in 2010 is, oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
It told me that my um I would have wanted to hear, like, yeah, this is totally possible. Like, why couldn't you do that? Over and over. I would want to hear that every day, all day long. Because there was so many people around me just being like, I don't know about that. Like, you're crazy. So I would have wanted to hear the opposite, which is like, yes, totally go for it, which is like what I try to do every day. It's like, yes, let's monetize everything.
Absolutely.
It's possible.
Because then that's like almost, oh gosh, I can't imagine like having two battles then, basically like your own self-doubt to begin with, and then other people's doubts to make you have to work over to get there.
But there's so many examples now. Like, this is going to make me sound so old, but when I graduated college, there was no Instagram.
Hey, we're the same age, I think, because I'm college 2010 too.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, Instagram was not a thing when we graduated college for like another like 3 or 4 months. So now there's so much more connection to see what's possible. But then it was like you really didn't know unless you like saw it, which I was actually lucky to go to school in Boston, which is like a very thriving like arts center. So there was a lot of like handmade markets and stuff like that. And that's kind of, I think, where the idea sort of started, like the serious idea started. So just being able to see people do it is really encouraging. So I would tell people, look at all these people who are doing it, and also, yes, it's totally possible.
Totally. Well, and I think too nowadays some people might be overwhelmed with the fact that, oh, there's so many people doing what I want to do. But at the same time, it means, I think you've said this in the podcast too, so many Mary podcast references, but that means A, it works, B, people are buying it, and you can still make it your own, and how you're presenting who you are and your product is going to be unique to yourself.
Right. The fact that there's like 1,000 million jewelry people and a lot of them are successful means a ton of people are buying jewelry.
Yeah, well, and it's just like a whole range of jewelry, even just the jewelry's niche itself. It's like, is it embroidered jewelry or hammered whatever, or stone or whatever? There's so much nuance.
Yeah. I mean, even now there's still things I sometimes look for and I'm like, why can't I find that? How's it possible no one makes that?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so true.
But so there's room for everybody.
Yes, there always is, and it's just going for it, right? So where can everyone find you? I know it's pretty obvious, but
yeah. Well, on Instagram at Merriweather C. And if they are interested in Etsy, they can pop over to unlocketsy.com. That's like the first best place to start learning about Etsy from us. That's our free Etsy masterclass, unlocketsy.com. Probably the number one best place to start with that. And then the podcast is just the Merriweather Council podcast, which you can find on all the players.
Yes, totally. I love the podcast. Well,
thank you.
We are counting down on the live here, so I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for coming. Thanks, Danielle, for being here. This was so exciting for me to actually get to talk to you. But yeah, so I'll be saving this onto IGTV. Yes, thanks again for coming.
Bye.
Bye.